Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Long. I'm the Executive Director of Polk Vision, and I want to thank you for joining us. We have a small audience in person this evening, but a broad audience virtually. So if you didn't get a chance to make any of our in-person sessions, this is for those that are on the virtual call this evening, let me give you a little bit of an update on what to expect. Superintendent Heid will be bringing you the latest updates on the school district, and this is your chance to stay informed, hear the latest updates, his forecast for the next school year, as well as ask questions. So we will begin in just a few moments with his presentation, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the format for questions and answers. Our virtual audience can use the platforms identified on the Facebook live stream, as well as those of you that are in the audience. When it comes time for questions and answers, please be aware that we are being live streamed. So remember that what you say goes out into the virtual reality. So we'll want to make certain that it isn't anything that you want to be kept in strict confidence, right? So also for our audience that is out there virtually, you'll want to be able to speak into a microphone. So during Q&A, if you have a question, we'll run a mic to you. Keep your questions concise and to the point. And if you do need to share a bit of personal information with Mr. Heid or any of his staff, they're welcome to do that offline to make certain they get to the heart of the question in a more personal manner. We will have some, let me see, I just want to make certain I didn't lose any of the information I was supposed to share. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it over to Superintendent Heid. He's going to give you that update, and then we'll go into Q&A. Thank you again for attending.
Good evening, everyone. Fred Heid, Superintendent for Polk County Public Schools. It's my pleasure to be hosting this, our second series of town hall meetings. My first series was when I was first hired, and we went out to the community to get your feedback and input, hear about your frustrations with Polk County Public Schools or the benefits that you feel that you derive from our school system, so that as we began planning for a new strategic plan, we were well informed and prepared to keep our district moving forward in a positive direction. As was mentioned today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's unique about Polk County, and we'll start with our growth. Polk County Public Schools is one of the fastest growing school districts in the state of Florida, and arguably one of the fastest growing school districts in our nation right now. This school year, we initially anticipated growing about 5,000 students. At the end of last school year, we had 110,000 total students registered in Polk County. We anticipated starting or ending our school year with 115, except we are now at 117,200 students. And that growth is happening at the same time that nationally students are declining. We see declining enrollments in public institutions across the rest of the United States. In fact, 1.3 million fewer students participated in traditional public schools outside the state of Florida. And so we do see in Florida, we know Florida is unique in a lot of different ways, but Polk County continues to grow, continues to flourish. Additionally, we expect to see commensurate growth this school year, this summer. So we are expecting anywhere from another 7,000 to almost 9,000 students coming in at the end of the school year. When I was first hired, we were told that we could expect to grow 50,000 students in the next, I believe the number they threw out at me at that time was 18 years. Well, clearly, between my first year here, first summer, and my second summer coming up, they were lying. And we underestimated very clearly. And it's both a plus, a benefit, and a challenge for us, because with growth comes the needs for us to ensure that we have enough seats for our students. And the second greatest challenge, and arguably the most important one to our families and our students, is making sure that we have a quality teacher in every one of those classrooms. Now, I will say, Polk County Public Schools has seen incredible improvements in our overall ability to do just that, to maintain high-quality instructors in our classrooms. At the same time last school year, we averaged about 290 vacancies, instructional vacancies per day. At the same time this year, we're averaging about 150, with 7,000 more students than we've ever had before. Our overall retention rate for our staff has increased significantly as well, and I give a lot of credit to my predecessor, Superintendent Byrd, and the team that she established here to focus heavily on teacher retention. And so actually when that program began, if I recall correctly, our retention rate for our staff was 54 or 56%. As of this last year, we were at 82%, and we expect to continue to hopefully see that number grow. We've seen steady growth over the last 4 years. It's one of the reasons why we've been able to fill our classrooms. We've also become And we've gone and become very innovative in how we staff our classrooms. We've gone outside the country. We've found highly certified, qualified teachers from neighboring countries and brought them here to help deliver instruction on our campuses. We are also developing stronger Grow Your Own programs. We've got the Greenhouse program here as well within Polk County Public Schools, where paraeducators, once they get a feel for education, if they really like the profession, they can grow into it and earn their certifications. And so we have multiple strategies in place. And one of the ways we're going to focus moving forward is focusing on our high school students. You know, we have a number of academies. I'll touch on those here later on in the presentation. But we have academies in education, pre-education pathways for our students. And so we're going to have to get creative and innovative. How do we retain and recruit them to come back and teach? Because the days of us receiving several dozen applicants for a vacancy are gone. And we have to find ways to retain our staff and recruit them to come into Polk County. Because while we're not typically in competition with Miami-Dade or Palm Beach or Broward County, we are absolutely every single day of the week in direct competition with Hillsborough, Pinellas County, and Orange County Public Schools for quality instructional staff and other support staff across the school district. Here you can see on this table, and I'm sorry, I just realized that those of you here in person can't necessarily see it. You see it up here on the screen now. You see we compare ourselves against what we call, we're in the Big Seven. We actually were not inside the Big Seven until this school year. We surpassed Pinellas County with our student enrollment, so now we are the 7th largest school district in the state of Florida. We're the 24th largest school district in the nation. And again, as we continue to grow, if you pay attention in particular to Duval County, if our growth continues, it would not surprise me if we don't surpass Duval County to be the 6th largest school district either this summer or in the very near future. Our overall growth pattern has been really exceptional. For the 2 years of COVID, you see here we grew 12%. Our total growth, including this school year, because we're at roughly 4.5%, almost 5%, we've grown almost 16, 17% over the last 3 years, which as you look across the table here, you'd see no one else even comes close to that. And so we, and Miami-Dade in particular, are seeing more of a rebound in their enrollment. And I don't know why they declined steadily, but I think this table is very indicative of what's going on here in Polk County. And if you live in the northeast or on the east portion of our school district, growth is not a surprise to you. You can't go anywhere without seeing a new development. Road congestion is an issue, and I know the city and the county and everyone else is heavily focused on those areas because we want to maintain our quality of life here in Polk County Public Schools and in Polk County in general. So here's some other topics we're going to talk about this evening. School staffing allocation model, our strategic plan, our academy magnet and workforce improvements, our financial efficiency audit, which just concluded, and our school and student safety initiatives. I will not list those, just so you understand. There's no slide for that. There's not going to be anything written. I'll talk about a few of our school safety enhancements, but obviously for obvious reasons, I cannot disclose all of the things that we have in place to protect our students because we wouldn't want somebody to have that information and then actively work to circumvent those. So let's start with the school staffing allocation model. So in very simple terms, this is just a formula. It's a formula that says that Mr. Heid or school principal XYZ, based off the enrollment at Bartow Middle School and based off the specificity of enrollment. So let me be clear, it's not just on the total number of students enrolled on a campus, it's also based off those students' individual needs. Do they have special needs? Do they require additional assistance? Those students can actually qualify in the state of Florida under a specific matrices to get additional funding. So for example, if a student requires, because they have a physical impairment that requires a full-time nurse, we get additional funding to help cover the costs for that full-time nurse to be with that student. The same thing's true for other students who have significant cognitive disabilities, and for some of our students, our ELL students receive additional weighted funding as well. But basically what the formula says is that based off the total number of students in a school, this is how many employees they get. This is how many core teachers they get. This is how many administrative staff they get. This is how many clerical staff they get. But we realized during my first year here that because during the last recession, what Polk County did was we actually did what every other school district did. We tightened our belts because the amount of funding that we were receiving from the state had to dwindle, right? So it was prorated. So we were not receiving the same allocation we'd always received because, again, the recession was hitting and the money wasn't there. The property tax revenue value wasn't there. And so we had to kind of right size. So when vacancies occurred, we may not have filled those. We may have consolidated positions. Well, that led, quite honestly, to a lot of inconsistencies. And I use guidance counselors as a good example. In a traditional high school, if a high school has 1,800 to 2,000 students, they typically are funded a minimum of 4 guidance counselors. However, we have elementary schools that have similar enrollment. They have one guidance counselor. And so I think it doesn't take a lot of thinking to realize that for a guidance counselor to try and fulfill all of their duties and responsibilities for 1,800 students by themselves is virtually impossible. And quite honestly, even for 4 teachers with 1,800 to 2,000 students, that's a huge workload for them. Think about it, 180 school days. Even if they were to schedule 30-minute meetings, the likelihood of them seeing a child more than twice in the school year mathematically starts to become a challenge because they don't get 180 school days. Our counselors are pulled very frequently because of crises that happen on our campuses. Students are dealing with issues at home. We're still coming out of COVID. We're still feeling the realities of COVID with students and anxiety and other issues that they've dealt with as a direct result. And so we end up having to counsel and support those students, which then means that counselor may lose a part of their day or the entirety of their school day as a direct result. So we went back to our school allocation model because as Polk County grows, that means we're getting additional revenue, and it's time for us to really focus on how do we improve our staffing ratios. So at elementary schools, we will see an improvement in the total number of guidance counselors, clerical staff, because that's the other thing that got cut back significantly at elementary, was the number of secretarial staff that they have. So our traditional, when you look at a middle school or a high school that traditionally has a bookkeeper, a principal secretary, an enrollment specialist, and all these varied positions, it's not uncommon in some of our elementary schools for all those roles to be filled by one person. And so we have really looked at our allocation model to make sure it makes sense. We base it off of class size. We also base it off specificity of program needs. In Polk County, one of the things I really appreciate is that as we've grown new academy programs, we've always pre-funded or pre-loaded those programs because the assumption is that as academies flourish, more students will try to attend that school. And then that student number, increase in student number, offsets the cost of additional staff. So one thing that Polk County does is anytime we launch an academy, we fully fund those positions for a minimum of 3 years. And we have done so between 3 to 5 years to allow the program enough time to grow and begin to see enrollment increases. It's interesting though when you look at our school district as a whole, and you look at how we staff our schools, one of the difficulties we have is that not all of our schools are at 100% capacity. If all of our schools had an equal number of students in every classroom at every grade level, staffing would be very simple. But that's not our reality. We have some schools, for example, the ratio of teacher to student is 1 to 12 or 1 to 17, whereas in another school for the same grade level, it may be 1 to 26. So as a result, it's interesting when you look at the total number of students and total number of staff, we are typically overstaffed, and so we're taking steps right now to try and rectify some of that. Rezoning is a topic that will be discussed very frequently here over the next year and a half. High school rezoning is a topic that's going to come before the board in the next 2 months. Now, we won't implement anything for a full year, and parents will go out to the communities, we'll get feedback, and make sure everybody has a voice. But we do have to make some difficult decisions because we have high schools that are growing well beyond their capacity, and we do not want to have high schools exceed 3,000 students. It becomes impersonal, it becomes difficult to manage, and relationships matter a great deal at our middle schools and high schools. So we want them to be neighborhood schools where we have that look and feel and those relationships. So you notice here this portion of our plan for school staffing allocation model pushes out 4 to 5 years. And the reason for that is we cannot afford to add every position we feel we need in 1 or 2 years. So it's going to be a slow roll, it's going to be a gradual implementation so that we can ensure that every position that we put out into schools is sustainable into the future. It's very disingenuous, very disrespectful, I feel, to hire somebody and then a year later say, well, we didn't plan well and we don't have enough money, so we're going to have to cut your position. We really don't want to put anybody in that position at all. And so we are being very, very intentional in how we're doing this. So I'm very proud of third grade performance last year coming into this school year. So third grade of all the school districts, of 67 traditional school districts in the state of Florida, only 11 of them showed improvement in third grade reading scores. Polk County was one of the 11. Very, very proud of that because that's the litmus test, quite honestly, in public education. The more students we can have reading on grade level in third grade is a strong indicator of how those students will progress through our education system and how many of them will have access to rigorous coursework and or programs. Because if those students move on from third grade reading below grade level, the likelihood, due to the fact that they have to have intensive reading and remediation, the likelihood of them getting access to more rigorous coursework becomes incredibly difficult for them. It does serve as a barrier to that. So our emphasis as a school district, it will continue to shift to focus on ensuring that more students are reading on grade level by the end of grade 3. And quite honestly, our community for next school year can expect to see a more focused effort on expanding our pre-K footprint. Pre-K is an area that, quite honestly, we really can't continue to afford to keep waiting for students to get to 3rd grade to get a good measure of their progress and their academic performance. We really need to start earlier. And our goal then is to make sure that every student entering 3rd grade is entering on grade level standard. And so over the next few years, my recommendations to the board that you'll hear over the next few months will be a stronger expansion of our pre-K footprint and early childhood footprints. Because again, I believe that early intervention is a much better pathway than chasing students who are already falling behind. Only 6 school districts had no change from the prior year performance. 50 school districts out of 67 saw their 3rd grade reading performance decline. That's why as a school district, I stated in the media that we didn't necessarily see some of the negative impact academically due to COVID. Definitely not in reading. In mathematics, we did see a decline, but in literacy, we did not. And so this is a good indicator of that. Overall, the state did see a decrease in students reading on 3rd grade, but again, Polk County was not part of that. So there are 5 levels, and obviously level 3 means you're reading on grade level. Level 2 means you're reading at least 1 grade level below, and level 1 means you're reading 2 or more grade levels below your grade level. And that becomes a huge problem for us. So one of the things we look at is how many students scored at level 1. And 50 or 60% of our 84 eligible elementary schools saw a decline in the number of students reading at level 1. And that's a huge testament as well. And we should see that. As we see more students reading on level 3, we should see fewer students at level 1 and level 2. 12 of our schools saw a double-digit decrease in the number of students reading on level 1. And again, that's a huge testament to them. And 11 schools saw a 5 to 9 percentage point decrease as well. Proficiency, whether or not our students are reading on grade level, 40 or 48% of our 84 eligible schools saw an improvement in the number of students reading at level 3. 15 schools, again, had a double-digit increase. 13 schools had a 5 to 9 percentage point increase, and 6 schools had no change from the prior year. I'll skip over this slide because it's very difficult for those of you in the audience to see, but basically it shows how we compare to the larger districts again, the big 7. And here's our school grade summary, which is best summarized just with this table here. We doubled the number of A-rated schools. We almost doubled the number of B-rated schools. C schools improved by 20. The number of D schools declined by 24 from the prior year. So we went from a total of 42 to 18. And the F schools, all 7 F schools improved. We do have 1 F school right now, Elbert Elementary School. However, historically, that school has never scored less than a C. And we fully expect for that school to improve and exit and earn a C or better at the end of the school year. We put a lot of resources and supports in place to help ensure that that school is successful, as we typically do for any school that starts to show any decline. But here's the sad reality. So I'm a very transparent person, especially I'm a believer, and many of you have heard this statement before. You can use data to tell any story you want to. You can cherry pick the data and celebrate in isolation. But the truth of the matter is, we need to own, and I need to own as your superintendent, these rankings. So we cannot sit here, and I can't sit here and tell you all these great sunshiny things about our 3rd grade reading, when overall as a school district, we ranked 52nd in ELA. Now that's all grade levels included, but we ranked 52nd out of 67 school districts. We ranked 58th in mathematics, 56th in algebra 1, 56th in geometry, 51st in 5th grade science, 53rd in 8th grade science, 33rd in civics, 59th in US history, and 54th in biology. Civics, I would argue, is the only acceptable score that's on there. And it does raise questions for me as an educator, because the civics exam is clearly a reading exam. So how is it our students could do so well there? And again, admittedly, that's also limited to a particular grade level. So keep that in mind, whereas all the other scores are across, unless they're grade level specific, they're across all of our scores for the district. But I do believe that that score indicates that more of our students are reading on grade level than not. And again, we need to continue to see improvement here, because if we just accept these facts, then somehow we're accepting that somehow students in Polk County are deficient or less than other students, and we do not accept that. So we have to continue as well as we did in third grade reading. I think that set the stage for where we want to go. And I'm hearing good things out of our testing right now. We just started testing our final exams this week. And so right now, fifth graders took tests today. I believe third graders will assess tomorrow. And so we look forward to seeing how our students do. But again, third grade set the stage. Hopefully we see fourth and fifth grade continue to see improvements steadily each year, so we can keep chipping away at our state ranking, because let's be honest, our staff are much better than this. I know that for a fact, having observed classrooms, and I also know our students are better than this. We just have to show it now in our statewide assessment data. So strategic plan. When we launched the strategic plan, we avoided the typical error of the assumption, right? So as an incoming superintendent with a strategic plan that was sunsetting, it would be very easy to come in, look at the data, and make a whole lot of assumptions about what needs to be fixed or what the issues are. Instead, we didn't do that. We actually started with you. We started with our community. We went out to you and asked you for over 5 months to complete a survey for us. And that was the portrait of a graduate. Basically, what are the top 10 skills, traits, or characteristics that you would want to see in a high school graduate? And then from there, we backwards problem solved. And we identified our 5 strategic plan goal areas. And then Polk Vision, who's hosting tonight's event and our community events, actually met with each board member to then align themes with each one of these goals. So obviously our first goal needs to be what it is, student outcomes. That's our core business. It's both academic in nature, and it's also about whether or not our students are enriching. So we want our students to have positive outcomes. And so the board said, okay, Mr. Heid, if we're going to focus on academic attainment and graduation rate and college readiness and career and workforce readiness, we want to see data. We want to see accountability. And so we actually started to address this issue this year. All of our high schools had at least one position, one assistant principal position, elevated to 12 months. They may have been a 10-month or an 11-month, and they now oversee the academy programs. They had to develop what we call an academy improvement plan, similar to a school improvement plan, where they collect their data and they look at how many students are enrolling each year, how many students are quitting the program, and then ultimately how many students are completing the program. And so that's important data to us, because having programs in name only is not what we're about. We have the second largest number of academy certified and endorsed academy programs in the nation. And I do believe that within the next year, we very well may be first. But again, we have to make sure that our academy programs are flourishing and that they're being successful. And if they're not, how do we then retool and refocus and re-energize those programs moving forward? Our goal number 2 is developing great teachers and leaders. Obviously, we can't have effective instruction without having quality people in our classrooms. So we looked at, and one of the board's priorities are diversity, making sure that our students have people teaching classrooms that look like them. We are 62% of our student enrollment are minorities. 42% are Hispanic, 20% are African American Black. And there's another 2% in there that are biracial. And so when you look at our enrollment, again, majority minority, we don't necessarily have a demographic teaching cadre that's reflective of their backgrounds. And so they want more diversity, and we continue to work on that, while also ensuring that we have quality instructors. That's our primary responsibility. Our leadership pipelines. We've retooled our leadership programs. We had a lot of people that were going through our programs, getting certified or endorsed, basically saying, you're ready to be a principal, you're ready to be an assistant principal, yet they weren't being successful in actually attaining those jobs. And so we met with several of them, talked to them about their frustrations with the interview process, the lack of feedback that they were getting, and so we retooled and we redesigned that entire program, and now they get very explicit feedback about how areas to improve, and it actually becomes part of their work plan for the next school year. So if I were to apply for an assistant principal's job and I don't get it, I'm actually going to get a form that identifies all the leadership traits and characteristics as identified by the state of Florida that are important, and I get feedback on each one of those as it relates to my interview. I then have to share that with my building principal. And then together we develop a work plan that says, okay, Fred, you're going to work on these things next school year as a priority to get you ready. So now we've filled the gap. We're not just telling people, wow, you did really well, I would like to hire you, but we're actually giving explicit feedback, honest feedback, polite feedback. You don't have to be rude to give people feedback on our areas to improve, but we want to make sure that they're getting that type of information, because there's no way for them to retool and refocus and say, okay, how do I improve in order for me to be successful in my application? And we want to be honest with people. We provide more peer mentoring. Our vacancies, we track our vacancies every week. Our staffing allocation model, as I said, was a priority for the board. We've already addressed that. And pay scale and salary. So amongst our staff, for those of you who are very much in tune with Polk County Public Schools, you know that we went to impasse prior to, I think, the year prior to my arrival, because there was a dispute about how we could utilize the new funding coming in from the state of Florida. And the state was very explicit, and they gave a percentage, and if I recall correctly, Jason, because I wasn't here, I believe it was 90% had to be used on new teacher salary, and only 10% could be used for compression, or maybe it was even less than that in the first year. And so during my first year and a half, first year, we successfully negotiated 2 teacher contracts and 2 of our employment contracts with our ASME trades groups and our bus drivers. And the reason for that was to get everybody to that base salary. So the state of Florida did give every school district an infusion of additional funds every year for the last 2 years to ensure that we could move our base salary to $47,500. But the problem was, because they didn't give us any additional funds beyond that, what ended up happening was the base salary moved up, but for our veteran staff, nothing was available to move them. And so we have a number of staff, for example, 10 or more years. I met a teacher today who's been with us for 15 years who's making the exact same amount of money as a first-year teacher makes. And so moving forward, we're committed to ensuring that all the new dollars coming in from the state, because the state's continuing to fund this program, go towards what we call salary compression. It'll allow us to start to space them out and ensure that our veteran teachers are getting compensated in a fair and equitable manner as well. Engaging family and community members. Obviously, we're doing more of these types of meetings. This is my second series in the last 2 years. Next year, the one tweak that we will do is we're actually going to try and do them throughout the year. Instead of asking me and my team to do these all within a 3-week or 4-week period of time, it gets a little harder. Plus, it'll allow us to get to more of our communities. There's still, even though we doubled the number of sites this year, we still have communities that we have not visited. And so we want to make sure, again, in fairness to them, they have an opportunity to attend these. Also making sure that we increase our communication to you. So very soon, you will start to see an email that comes out called the 411. You'll basically get that once a month after school board meetings. It will summarize interesting topics or things that took place at school board meetings and decisions that were made, and I'll basically explain any impact that it may have on students, teachers, or our community as a whole. Many of you complimented very positively, gave good feedback about our communication throughout the hurricanes, and not only telling you whether or not we'd be closed, but explaining why we had to take the steps we've taken, why we can't just open schools immediately tomorrow morning, and very appreciative of the feedback that we've gotten, because the goal is to communicate very transparently so that you understand how we arrive at our decisions, and that's important for us as a school district. We have community liaisons that help us engage our communities differently. These people serve in a role where they go out and they visit with the school, and they identify their needs, and then they make connections within the community, business partners, local faith-based organizations, and those types of entities so that we can get those needs filled. They're not only looking for donations. We're looking for volunteers. We're looking for tutors. We're looking for mentors. There will be a much more aggressive push starting this summer looking for volunteers and tutors next year. I think a lot of people are still under the impression or the idea that because of COVID, that we're not necessarily accepting volunteers and mentors, and that's not true. And so we need to do a better job of communicating that and conveying that to our stakeholders. I'll talk a little bit more about cultivating partnerships when we talk about our trades and our academies. Equitable and efficient use of resources. It's incredibly important for us to ensure that we have our community's trust. The number one thing that most often comes up when we talk about school districts, we have a very large budget. We're a $2 billion operation. And many people look at our budget and say, well, there's got to be mismanagement in there. So 2 things we've done to address that. Number 1, we've held an efficiency audit, and the results are in. We'll be sharing that publicly. We had it done by a third party. I'm the only school board employee who sits on that committee of 30-plus individuals. The rest are all community-based partners and leaders. They're mayors, they're city managers, they're other business leaders here in our community. They're faith-based leaders. And the reason for that, we wanted a diverse group because we wanted that trust. We don't want the community to think that, well, because we paid for an audit to be done, that we're only going to share the positive things. No. The goal of this was to say, and we were really hoping, let's find some areas where we're not managing our money well, because we want to put more money at the classroom level. And actually, we found that as a school district as a whole, we do a very good job with our funding. But I'll show you a few slides here in a few minutes about the equity audit. And that's coming to, not to an end, but our next meeting, our team right now is actively working on estimates. For example, what would rezoning our entire school district do for cost savings? Because if you think about it, right now we have elementary students or even middle school students who drive past the school to get to their school. And I know that frustrates our families. And think about that. That's a bus route that we could eliminate. So it's not just about better utilization of our buildings. It's also about all of those other ancillary positions that help support that infrastructure and that need that actually can be repurposed. We average about 60 driver vacancies a year. We do believe, based off our preliminary review, that we could eliminate all 60 vacancies just by rezoning. We could eliminate those vacancies just by rezoning. Now, all those salaries would then be reinvested back into the school district. So we're not looking to cut salaries. We're not looking to cut employees. These are vacancies. I want to be very clear about that. But if we are more intentional and more purposeful in how we plan and how we support our school district, I believe we're going to find inherent cost savings that are directly going to benefit us at the school level and at the classroom level. And then finally, developing the whole child. This goes hand in hand with student outcomes because, quite frankly, part of what we want to do is develop well-rounded citizens. We want our students to be well-mannered, well-purposed, very focused, civic-minded, responsible, just like you do as parents. We want the same things. It's not our role to teach all of that, but we do support that through our student code of conduct, through other initiatives. But this is also where we make sure that our students get access to things that they may otherwise get access to, the fine and performing arts. The performing arts in particular, try and buy a French horn. Try and lease a musical instrument. It's incredibly cost prohibitive. So for some of our families, their child may not ever have got access to one of those programs. And let's be honest, our goal is to, again, develop the talent in our students and develop well-rounded students. The arts are a great way for students to explore the world around them, to learn history, to learn all those things. And so we're excited. You know, athletics, another great opportunity for our students. Our trades, all of our academy programs, these are all enriching opportunities that help develop a well-rounded student. So I'll move on to our academy magnet and workforce improvements. As I shared, we have the second largest number in the nation. Very excited to share that we have several new programs coming. Air traffic control, and if our estimates are correct and our research is correct, we will be the only school district in the entire southeast of our nation that has an air traffic control program. The earning potential for students is approximately $90,000 a year. And so we're very lucky too, because if it weren't for Bartow and the Bartow Airfield, which has a remote tower, we wouldn't be able to offer this program. That's what's unique for us. And so they actually sought us out because of the program and because of the high need to fill vacancies, and as they expect high retirement wave to come through air traffic control over the next few years. Great opportunities for our kids. Our licensed practical nurse program. We have an exceptional phlebotomy and EKG program on our campuses. Now we're looking to round that out with an LPN program and medical assistants. We'll be announcing soon a partnership with one of our local, larger community-based partners who's actually going to pay students to complete the program for medical assistance. It'll be about a half-a-year program, and then they will guarantee 90 positions a year for our students to go into. That's how many vacancies there are right now locally for that employer alone, that they can guarantee up to 180 positions a year. So it's exciting. Network IT, network security, high school civics. This year we got a competitive grant for 6 of our high schools to take on a civics academy. But this is not just a traditional civics as we've grown to know, where we learn about our history, we learn about local government. It is far more than that. It is about actually placing our students with some of our local municipalities in those employment opportunities. So it goes much further than that. We want our students to want to work here for our local municipalities and organizations, and there's plenty of opportunities. This idea started, quite honestly, with a story I heard in Auburndale that their current city manager started, they actually recruited him because they saw him, and I may not tell the story completely accurately, so I apologize if he's watching. But it started out because he was consistently mowing a lawn in a neighborhood. Not his own lawn, but somebody else's. And at the time, the mayor saw him and said, you know what, that young man is out there no matter what, doing that job. That's somebody we want. And so they brought him into the city, hired him, and then over time, he actually grew into his current role. And it was a great opportunity. So I heard that story, and so when we started talking about the Civics Academy, that's what we want. We want to place our kids in our municipalities and give them a pathway to employment and future success. And then the last one is hospitality. So this actually is a unique partnership with both the University of Central Florida and with Harry Rosen. So Harry Rosen has a hospitality college program in Orlando. They reached out to us. We did a tour of their facility, and they will actually come out and work with our students under the Hospitality Academy. And let's be honest, part of this is self-serving. They know that the industry in Orlando, the job economy there is going to get more competitive. They need to keep hiring, as do all of us. And so they want to have a pipeline of future employees. The difference here is our kids won't be selling soda. The difference is our kids will be managing. Our kids will be leading. Our kids will be engineers. They'll be construction engineers, because hospitality encompasses a huge, broad spectrum of job opportunities. And with Universal Studios looking to open up a new theme park in the next few years, they've already announced that they're going to hire 16,000 employees. Well, with all due respect, I want to position our students to be competitive for some of those job opportunities and give them the best possible pathway to future success. Magnet schools. We do an exceptional job with our magnet schools. We actually were awarded this year, for this year's implementation and planning phase, $6.2 million. This was a highly competitive grant application. I think the total is over $15 million in funding. We got the second highest allocation in the state. There were only 3 awards given to the state of Florida. And it actually will result in these 5 elementary schools expanding and creating better pathways to their middle school and high school counterparts. That's something we focused very heavily on this school year. We started to expand our programs, but we expanded them into other zip codes. So when we talk about Central Florida Aviation Academy, but it's at the Lakeland Airport, it can be very difficult for students on the east side to commute to get to that program and participate. So what we ended up doing was we've now opened up a Winter Haven location, and it's become highly popular already. We're doing a ribbon cutting for that on Wednesday. And so that's the type of thing, the mindset that we're approaching these things for, is how do we create pipelines and synergy amongst our K-12 programs. So Fred G. Garner will now become a STEM Polytechnical Academy for its students. James Stevens will take on International Baccalaureate. Stevens will now feed into Union Academy, which then feeds directly into Bartow High School. Roosevelt W. Blake will have Cambridge, Bethune will have Cambridge, and Daniel Jenkins will have Cambridge, which arguably feeds into the Winter Haven programs there. And so again, we continue to find opportunities to align and replicate programs that parents are demanding and asking for. I know many parents are frustrated during the magnet and school choice windows, especially when they get waitlisted or they don't make the first choice during the lottery process. And so many of you will be happy to hear at least 3 of those high interest programs, we authorized the expansion of seats today. So we can get more families onto those campuses, because that's where they want to be. So we're trying to replicate programs, and we're trying to expand program seating options so that more families can feel like their children are getting access to high quality academic programs. Workforce development. So very proud of the school board. At the last board meeting, they approved 2 new job descriptions just for students. So these are our trades. There's one for our trades techs. These are students at Travis or Ridge, or even some of our high school students can actually come and work this summer. They'll get paid $15 an hour minimum, and they'll work alongside our trades techs. They can do electrical, HVAC, plumbing, carpentry, landscaping. So we have plenty of opportunities. There'll be a lot of advertising that comes out over the next 2 weeks about this, so that we can start recruiting students and getting them through the application process. The other is more of a traditional internship process. And this can be utilized not only by the school district, but by some of our community-based partners. So we want to make sure, again, our students are earning that $15 an hour. For some of our community-based partners, we know that that's not something they can necessarily afford. So we're actually extending that offer to say, listen, if you can afford $8 an hour, then we'll cover the rest. We have grant funding that will supplement that. Additionally, we will have some positions here where they'll start to learn. They'll work directly with our media group. What a fantastic pathway. People don't realize how many people and what kind of work goes on behind the scenes to make something as simple as tonight's event happen. And so we're going to provide those opportunities for our students, and it's an exciting time. I talked about explicit partnerships earlier, expanding our partnerships. We really have to get a little bit more creative here when we talk about community partnerships, especially when we start talking about the trades. Traditionally what's happened in public education is the community comes forward and says, school district, we need more HVAC staff, mechanics. We need more diesel mechanics. We need more people with a CDL license. We need more nurses. And so we hear about the need. Well, up until recently, we could fulfill that need. But it's becoming increasingly difficult for us to hire people in these trades. Not because they don't necessarily just want to work for a public school, but their earning potential outside of public school is 5 times what I can pay them. So one of the solutions that we're offering is similar to what we're doing with law enforcement. So all of our schools have school resource officers. We pay anywhere from 70 to 80% of their salaries. And then the municipality pays the difference. We both benefit. I benefit by having a law enforcement officer, a trained and highly skilled officer on our school campuses to protect our students and our staff. The community benefits because when schools are closed, they have a much lower cost, right? They're only paying 20 or 30% of the officer's salary, and they get them for the rest of the year in the summer when the schools are closed to help serve and protect their communities. So it's a great working relationship. Well, that's the kind of thing that we're starting to offer now to our trades groups. We're going out to companies and saying, listen, if you want a diesel mechanic, here's what we'll do. Why don't you come? We'll let you work out of one of our locations, and you make sure that at least 2 of your staff are certified. I'll pay a portion of their salary so that my students can learn side by side with them. The company wins because they get a lower salary cost. They also win because the people teaching our students are teaching them real-time, current industry standards, right? What typically happens in education is we create a program, 5 years later, we never revisit the program, so it no longer reflects what's actually happening in the industry. Think about how far we've come just with electric cars. That's a whole new skill set beyond a traditional mechanic. We think about how far we've come in telecommunications. You can't buy a phone or a laptop with it 6 months later it being obsolete. A new iPhone comes out every 2 weeks, it seems like. But that's the reality. So we're looking ahead. We benefit because, quite honestly, I get a highly qualified, trained person to be in the classroom delivering instruction to our kids. That's a win-win. And then the company ultimately benefits because guess what? They get a direct pipeline to their workforce. They get to work with these students day in and day out, and they'll be able to identify which students they want to interview first for potential job openings. So it's a great opportunity for us to share and come together to say, how do we fill this void? Versus what typically has happened, like I said before, is, I call it the live hand grenade, where somebody pulls a pin and says, Mr. Heid, we need more diesel mechanics. Good luck with that. Here it is, catch. And then I'm left holding the bag. Well, no, we've got to partner differently. So we're getting really innovative and creative how we're approaching this, and it's actually being very well received. Very proud of what we've been doing in school finance. So we started out by piloting a vehicle lease program. Not only did we start by replacing a large portion of our trades fleet, but we right-sized a lot of our vehicles. So instead of everybody having an F-250 dually, if you don't need one of those, you don't get one of those. You actually get a different truck or a vehicle that actually supports your job function. At the end of this lease program, when we actually return all these, we will actually get a refund. So we will actually benefit significantly from this. That's why we're piloting it, because if it's as fruitful as we believe it's to be, as it's outlined in the contract, it will be a very beneficial program for us. Even if it was cost neutral, the simple fact that I'll be able to refresh and replace my fleet of vehicles every 5 years is a huge benefit to our staff. And think about that. Just think about the economy that comes with that. GPS tracking, better fuel efficiency, better safety features. I mean, the fact that some of our people are driving vehicles initially that were over 15, 16 years old tells you that we could have been more intentional about how do we save fuel, how do we save on other costs. And so we're moving in that direction. We're building a new school, first of its kind for a school district. Although this type of pilot program has been in existence in the state for a large number of years, I believe they've built close to 20 or 30 schools for charter schools using the same format. It's the first time a school district's done it. Several other school districts are exploring this. They actually came and visited to tour this facility, and so we're leasing it. Now, we're leasing to own, which means that by the end of the 20th year, we will own the facility. You benefit as taxpayers. because I'm not having to borrow or go into debt and increasing our operating costs, which ultimately gets passed on to you, directly or indirectly. We don't impact our bond rating. We don't impact our borrowing power. We don't impact our general budget. So all I have to pay for is the annual lease payment. We can walk away from the building at any time. It is built to the exact same specifications as any other school in the state of Florida. We were directly involved with some of the design aspects. We get to pick the colors, we get to pick the finishes. I mean, it's just like any other traditional school building, except we save money. One of the really interesting parts about this is we're actually, and many of you do this at home, we escrow. We're escrowing to replace the roof, to replace the HVAC while we're paying our lease payments. This is the first time we've ever been able to do or ever taken an initiative to do prepay for preventative maintenance. So at year 7, the whole school gets a paint refresh. At year 15, it gets a brand new roof. At year 20, when we take ownership of it, the HVAC, all the other mechanicals get replaced. We prepaid for all of it. If this company has any additional costs, unless we go to them and say, we don't like the design, we need you to push this wall out, then we would incur a cost. But any costs right now that are results of them not being on time or other issues or other increases in costs, that's on the company's side. We're no longer responsible for any increases like that. And so it is a huge benefit for us. You know, I'm really excited to see how this pays off for our school system. It is a unique process. Again, where traditional public schools have not done this, and we'll see what happens. But we've got to be more intentional in how we build our schools. And let me give you a perfect example. And many people who were at the prior meetings did not hear this. But we need to build a high school. We need to build a high school in the Point Siena area very badly. But if we were to take the same Davenport High School model, we built that high school for approximately $110 million. And at the time, talk about sticker shock. Everybody was like, well, that's a lot of money to pay for a high school. You know what it's going to cost us now? Based off current estimates, $175 to $200 million to build that same school. And that's because of inflation, that's because of increased labor costs, because of COVID, delays and all kinds of other issues. But the reality of it is we've got to be really creative and innovative in how we're going to keep pace with all of this growth. And we desperately need a new high school. We can't just simply keep adding portables to our existing facilities because it's just not functional. Think about that. It's not just about classroom space. It's making sure you have enough restrooms. It's making sure you have enough cafeteria space. It's making sure your kitchen is large enough to be able to prepare meals. Because otherwise, in some of those school settings, I could see Haines City, if we had no high school planned to provide relief, Haines City High School would probably have to start serving lunch as early as 9 a.m. or 8:30 in the morning. They wouldn't have a choice because they've got to get all those kids through the cafeteria by the end of the day. So it's an interesting problem to have, and it's an interesting project, so we're really excited. I got a chance to visit it just last week and very impressed with the progress that's been made. They've already got asphalt down. They're finalizing some things. Drywall was up. They were painting. It's an exciting time. This is the part, if you've ever built a house or bought a new house and you're going through those final phases, you get really excited because this is when you get to see the flooring go in, and it goes from just being this concrete bunker to a school. And the classroom spaces are really bright, big windows, really excited to see. And it's an elementary middle school. So we'll have a gymnasium, has tennis courts. It's really well laid out. We restructured our bond debt during my first year here. As a result, we save anywhere from $180,000 to $200,000 in interest a year because of that. We eliminated $7 million in contracts last year. This year, we're looking to probably eliminate anywhere from between $3 to $5 million in contracted services. Those are dollars that go directly back to serving students in our classrooms. Our grants funds. So there's two types of grants. There's basically what I call an endowment. And it's not a traditional endowment, but I always struggle to find another term to use. So the state of Florida says, Mr. Heid, we have leftover funds from Title I or for some other federal program, and we want to support your summer reading program. So based off the number of students, if you submit your application, here's the requirements for a summer reading program, and we'll guarantee you $3 million. We write those grants all the time. Every time we get a chance to get free money, we go after it. These are competitive grants. And we have received in the last 18, 19 months over $66 million in truly competitive grants. $30 million alone went into laptops and the iPads for our students. And so we've done a really good job in recognizing we've got to do more with our current funds, but we also have to realize we're going to have to get really, really combative, not combative, but eager to go out there and find additional revenue. We've got to create opportunities for additional dollars to come into Polk County. We've improved our overall fund balance. We should end up somewhere between 10 and 12%. Now that number fluctuates a great deal based off a lot of factors, but we're also pleased to share that this year, for the first time in over 50 years, the state of Florida is actually going to modify the student formula for funding, and we should see an increase in the amount of revenue coming into Polk County. Now, depending on which version, we won't see the actual numbers until I think next week or 2 weeks, but the House and the Senate both have different projections of how much more money we might be able to see come into Polk County, and it could be anywhere from $60 to $80 million. And that's a huge benefit for us. Those are dollars that are desperately needed to invest back, like I said, back in our classrooms. And in our pre-K, so like I said, we're going to be doing a lot more with pre-K. We are excited. We were approached, one of our local community leaders connected me with Amazon and Bezos Foundation. They were looking to expand their footprint in Central Florida. They already have programs in Orange County and in Miami-Dade that are launching this school year, and they wanted to help us and partner with us to launch a year-round Montessori pre-K program that's tuition-free for our families. And so we took them around the school district, showed them several of our schools that had space to be able to bring them into the school, and they picked Oscar J. Pope. And so right now, their architects are looking at the building because obviously they're going to want to tweak some things. We're reviewing the contract, and if everything goes well and the board signs off on it, we'll be able to launch a program within the next year at Oscar J. Pope Elementary School. So great opportunity for our families, year-round program, tuition-free, Montessori-based, which tends to be a very popular program here. So it'll be interesting to see how many new students we can bring into that. I touched on the efficiency audit earlier. Again, the whole goal of this was, do we spend our money wisely? And if we don't, how do we retool and redirect those dollars so they can have a direct impact on our classroom spaces? And so we worked with a company called Katamba with some private funding, and they came forward and identified strategies and opportunities for us. And so two of the things they actually identified, let me go back a second, about how we get our funding. So this slide here shows where our fund balance comes, our funds come from, a combination of state, local, and federal dollars. And then this slide shows where we spend our money. So this is the interesting slide because most people look at this and they say, if you look at that teal section, which is the largest portion of the pie chart, at over 64%, people look at that and say, well, there's your spending, Mr. Heid. You've got too many salaries. You've got too many people with high salaries and benefits. Well, I mean, that looks like that when you look at the pie chart until you actually compare our salaries to the neighboring districts, especially the Big Seven. Here, if you're a high school principal, our high school principals' starting salaries are ranked 7th. Our average salaries, are 7th out of 7th districts. Average salary for middle school and high school principals, 6th. We're 7th ranked for elementary principals. Other types of schools, that would be K-8s or our center schools, we're ranked 7th. Superintendent salaries, 7th. Deputy assistant superintendents were ranked 3rd. I believe our ranking is actually skewed because if you look at some of those districts, they have 15 people in those and others have 18. And so we only have 2. So I believe that our average salary is actually much more competitive than that number depicts. But school board members were also ranked 7th. But here's where it matters most, classroom level, school level. For our guidance counselors, they're ranked 5th. That's the best performing group salary-wise in the entire district. And this is data that's available from the state of Florida Department of Education website, and they update it each year. Librarians are 7th ranked compared to other districts. School psychologists are ranked 7th. Social workers are ranked 6th, and our classroom instructional staff are ranked 7th. So again, part of what we have to do is not only address our veteran staff, but at some point we're going to have to keep addressing that base salary so we can be competitive. Because if you look at those salaries, others are starting no lower than $51,000, almost $52,000. We're at $47,500. And again, as I shared, we are in direct competition with Orange County and Pinellas and Hillsborough County. So it's a quick, let me rephrase that. There's nothing quick about commuting to Hillsborough or Orange County anymore. But who knows with high-speed rails and other things. But we've got to be more competitive. And let's be honest, we want to have the best and brightest in our schools. And salary alone does not predicate that, because there are other benefits we provide that other school districts do not. We're one of the few school districts remaining that fully funds our insurance. So our employees don't have a mandated contribution right now. So that's a benefit that we derive. And that's about a $350 or $400 a month savings for each one of our employees. And there's other things that we do as Polk County, but we have to keep highlighting those. And we have to show that when we advertise for positions so that people realize, okay, yeah, I may not necessarily get that in my take-home pay, but that benefit is definitely there. We actually had a teacher leave and went to Hillsborough County, and then within 6 weeks had come back. And I asked her, reached out to her and said, I heard you came back. Why'd you come back? She said, well, I left initially because Hillsborough County was paying $7,000 more a year until I realized that they weren't covering my insurance. And so it was costing her more than that to cover herself and her family. So it was cheaper for her to come back to Polk County and teach. And I said, well, welcome back. We're happy to have you back. She was a great teacher. So let me talk about school safety for a second. We've done several enhancements. So this school year, we started with random screenings. We started at middle school and high school. Last school year, if I recall the numbers correctly, I believe we had 6 or 7 handguns on our campuses. Thankfully, none were used in a threatening way. Students had them on them. They may have shown them to someone else, but none of them were ever brandished. No one was ever threatened directly, thank goodness. And we were very fortunate for that. We're also very fortunate to have a culture in Polk County where our students and our staff and our parents do speak up. And so they contact us. That's how we find these things. We don't just, so we started random screenings. This year, as a direct result, we've only identified 1 weapon as a direct result of our random screenings, which I think is a good thing. When I say random, it does vary. So by law, in order for you to have legal random searches on a campus, you can only search every 5th, 7th, 10th student. Doesn't matter what the number is. But for example, if we're counting every 10th student and Fred's a troublemaker and you see me walking through the door, and as I'm walking up, I would only be number 2, you can't say, you're number 10, Fred, step aside. You can't target students as a result. So we have to be very careful with our random searches. We do increase random searches anytime a threat is made on a campus. Unfortunately, with social media, we live in a time where it's not uncommon for students to spread rumors on social media. And we're very lucky to have a sheriff's office who is very good and very skilled at tracking down social media threats, and they're able to respond to us within minutes to say, it says, please don't come to school on Friday because something bad's going to happen, that kind of thing. It's pretty generic, but they'll be able to say, Mr. Heid, this originated out of Indiana, and it's 2 months old, but it's been circulating. But it pops up on Snapchat and on Instagram and those things, and so students then repeat it. But we track all of those things down. We track if a student is seen on social media holding a weapon. It's different if a student goes hunting with their family and they're shown there with a family member versus a student just brandishing a gun as if they're a gangster. We investigate every single one of those. And so as a result of the amount of time and effort that we expend doing that, we also ramped up the expectations for our students. If you make a threat on a campus, you go home for 5 days minimally. The second threat's 10 days, and also a referral to alternative school. So we will not tolerate those behaviors on our campuses. Now, we're not talking about a kindergartner who's on the playground going, pew, pew, I shot you. We're talking about students who make threats, openly make hostile comments, derogatory comments, and either written, verbal, or on social media. And we want to take a strong position on those things because you, just like me, want to maintain a strong safety, a strong setting on our campuses. And we want to set high expectations for our students. We want them to understand that's not appropriate here. And so we work with families, we work with law enforcement. Some of the new enhancements moving forward, we're going to change, instead of having the wanding for our random screening, we're going to have walk-through detectors, not traditional like you see at TSA or an airport. They're a little bit, they're a little more unique than that, and it'll allow us to monitor groups of students as they come through our buildings. What they'll essentially do is they'll notify an administrator. So let's say 6 of us were walking through, and it says, we don't like something about Mr. Hyde, it will take a picture of me and send it to the administrator saying, please find this student and do a secondary search on him. We're also working with the Sheriff's Department to bring in what we call gun sniffing dogs. They can smell the gunpowder residue and can trigger. So it's a sad reality that we have to take all these steps, but we realize that, listen, these are your children, these are our children, it's my child at one of our schools, and we want to make sure that they and our staff are safe at all times to the greatest extent possible. There are several other things that we're looking at doing that I'm not at liberty to disclose at this time. The last one that I'll share is anti-vaping, anti-THC. We were very lucky to join in a lawsuit against Juul and vaping in general, and we received a $2 million settlement. So all of those funds will be invested to address and install anti-vaping devices in our bathrooms, and they'll also go into education programs for our students, because they've got to understand that whether it's tobacco or THC, these are real health risks for them. And sadly, THC in particular, students are buying cartridges on the street, and they don't know where those things are being manufactured. And if you go to YouTube and you watch how THC is extracted and put in vape cartridges, it's being done in basements, it's being done next to lawn fertilizer and chemicals. I mean, there are some real hazards that our students may be exposing themselves to, other than just the THC itself, that we need to be careful with. And so we want to take every proactive step we possibly can. But again, there are other strategies we're using, and at some point we'll be able to disclose those, but right now I'm not comfortable doing that. But each and every time, sadly, there's an incident across the U.S., our group reconvenes and we reevaluate all of our existing policies and procedures to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can in real time to protect our staff and our students to the greatest extent possible. So that actually concludes my presentation for today, and we're welcome to open it up for questions. I know Kim's making her way down to see what's online, and we have several guests here in the audience with us. Let's start here in the audience. Does anybody have any questions? Raise your hand. They'll bring a microphone over to you.
Anyone from the audience? There you go. She'll bring a mic over so everyone can.
Hi there, my name is Amber Van Denzen. I have two children in the K through 5th grade programs in Polk County schools, even in the early intervention as needed at one point as well. This was not related to any subjects that you spoke about today. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The things I've noticed, two things I've noticed since having children in schools for Polk County, all the way from Davenport to Lakeland and Mulberry, is two big things that I've noticed, and I would love. I'm going to be naive on this subject, so that's why I asked. The first is the inequality of food and food type products that are available to children in Polk County schools. Our children have been to 4 different schools collectively in Polk County, and the quality of food product provided if they purchase a school lunch is unequal at best. From school to school. For example, one school would have canned fruits and vegetables at any point ever in the school day. Others would have watermelon, blueberries. So when seeing these type of products, while they're hitting the bare minimum requirements that is required, obviously there's quite a contradictory difference. I'm curious of what the school district kind of oversees or budgeting situations from school to school that create that situation.
We oversee all of our food and nutrition, and I'm surprised to hear this because we establish one consistent menu. So I will be more than happy to follow up and get your contact information and actually provide a written response, since this is a virtual, and we'll address it in an FAQ we can attach so the whole community can hear the response. The expectation is, regardless of a school, regardless of the number of students there on free and reduced lunch, that all of our students get the same quality food lunches. Now, I can't speak to whether or not a school did not receive a certain shipment at one time, which could result in some inequities in what they have. We've had schools, for example, where the ovens go down for a day, and as a direct result of not having propane, we have to serve a cold lunch. I mean, those things happen, right? And I think you understand that.
Fair enough.
But if we're seeing consistent differences in our food quality and product, that's a problem. And I will be more than happy to address that with our food service managers and their staff to find out more. But that's my understanding is we establish one consistent menu, and that food quality does not change based off the school or the students we serve. I, for one, won't tolerate that. I know our school board would not. They're all funded equally. And we're very fortunate in Polk County to be under a global free and reduced lunch program. So we do get some subsidies that way. But I'd be happy to follow up. Jason?
In fact, we're free food service all the way around. Our students
Right.
don't pay
Unless they want an enhancement, right?
My second statement that I saw is in a modern day of 2023 and talking about diversity of children, diversity of humans, and creating well-rounded humans. I still see a couple of schools in the Polk County district that my children, one attended at one point or other friends' children have, regarding dress code situations, specifically related to hair and persons that identify as male. There are multiple schools that currently in their dress code policies prevent male-based children or boys, as they'll label them, having long hair or extending past the collar, even with wording such as even if disguised with a bun or a ponytail. I don't think that's appropriate. Number one, I don't think a person's hair length affects their education, whether male, female, or other gender identification. And when I'm seeing schools like Brigham Academy and Bartow Academy putting those consistently still in their dress code policies, and I know personally of a friend's child that was directly affected that wasn't allowed to proceed forward with having hair even though he wanted it longer and it was well maintained and clean. What is the concept of related to that, allowing, while Polk County School District has their own dress code policies, allowing schools to edit those based off of their needs, and specifically when I'm seeing or hearing conversation related to, well, it's that's how it's always been done.
Yeah, so two things. They can't change the policies based off their whims. It requires the SAC committee. So school uniforms, everything about that, any modification, they must maintain the minimum expectations that the school board has established. If they want to provide additional restrictions based off certain issues on their campus, then they absolutely may do so. But they have to do that in accordance with the bylaws and their SAC committee. So this issue is one that I would be more than happy, again, if you could give Ms. Winchester your contact information and we can get a list of those schools, we can remind them that they do have to review those on a regular basis. I, for one, don't see any issue with hair length. Hair color, those types of things.
Hair color is a huge factor as well in majority of the schools as well, but especially when in the younger elementary brackets, you'll see that in the dress code policies. But specifically when I start seeing that was all gendered, when I'm seeing gender specific hair changes, that's what I think is concerning, because in a modern day and age, you can have any gendered child, short hair, long hair, if as long as it's being maintained appropriately, I don't think a child should be discriminated because of that and prevented from going to potentially a magnet school, which those two particular, I believe, are magnet schools because of hair length.
Sure. But that's a conversation for us to have with their SAC committee and remind them of their duty and responsibility, and for us to have with their administration. I'm disappointed if you were truly told, well, that's how we've always done it. That is not, I shouldn't say surprising, but it is frustrating, because doing things the way we've always done them is why we're ranked 52nd in ELA, and so we have to be more receptive to how are we going to be innovative. Now, there are certain lines we're not going to cross, and there are certain expectations in our student code of conduct that we're just not going to tolerate.
Yeah, when you see those things and it's modern day and you see, well, because it's not business professional have multicolored hair. Well, there's many people in this room right now because it's not considered a natural hair color. What's the difference? We can see professional judges, lawyers, doctors, that have rainbow colored versions, and it doesn't affect them and their skill set of their brain and access to be professional because of that. Why are we teaching our children?
Typically the goal is to avoid distractions.
Right.
And I don't know what in particular took place that would have caused them to review that policy. But again, let me look into it.
Thank
so
you.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
But I can assure you my gray is real.
Mine too. Earned every one of them. We have a question from our virtual audience. Do you anticipate any budget cuts? And I'm going to twist this to say, do you anticipate any budget cuts or any benefits as we close out session, right? So
I anticipate several. Right now, we're sitting in a very good position financially with both the House and the Senate recommendations. Even if the additional dollars that come into Polk are significantly lower than what we've already heard projected, the flexibility they will provide us for certain categoricals will be beneficial to us. So historically, the categoricals said, okay, we're going to give you $10 million a year. They don't, for instructional materials. And we were never, so let's say we spent 9. That extra million could not be spent on anything else. Now the categoricals are more open. They've opened up 12 of them in total to allow more flexibility. So if I had dollars remaining in a project area, then I can move them someplace else where we may have additional need. So that flexibility is actually quite important for us. But the additional revenue, plus this year, we requested additional funding from the legislature, and right now they are contained within the budget, knock on wood. That could change at any time, or the governor could veto those line items. But as an example, we requested over $1 million in additional funding for generators for our hurricane shelters. We operated 12 hurricane shelters during the last hurricane event, and only 2 of them have generators. The one at Ridge Community High School has a large generator because that's the place where we take our medically fragile individuals. Both there, Bartow and McKeel are the only 3 medical facilities that open during hurricanes. So McKeel was the second one. So now we have mobile, we're requesting mobile generators that are on trailers, built on trailers. And essentially what we promised the state was, if we're not using them, we will be more than happy to drive them. Since we're centrally located, we're basically 4 to 5 hours from anywhere in the state. So we could actually deliver them to other counties in need. So think about Lee County after the last hurricane. They desperately needed generators and power and electricity just for recovery efforts. So we're more than happy to house those here locally, benefit from them if initially needed, and then use them moving forward. But it's additional funding like that we have to work with our local legislators on. And so I think the outlook for us right now is very positive. I think if there's a negative out there, it's the continued escalation of rising costs. Sadly, right now, if inflation hadn't had hit the way it did, if we hadn't had COVID, our sales tax revenue, and thank you to everyone who voted for the half-penny sales tax to help refurbish our older buildings. We're going to have one huge project coming up here, Elbert Elementary School, which is going to be just the poster child for what that program is supposed to be about. But if it weren't for the fact that rising costs and inflation, we would have almost doubled our budget this year. I mean, it's pretty impressive how much revenue we generate in sales tax revenue here in Polk County. But because costs have gone up, I think the extra $18 or $22 million that were projected are already spent because rising costs for all of those projects that we have on the books. So it would have been a great time for us to get deeper into our list of projects with that extra revenue, but it's just not available right now. So my hope is that we start to see the economy level off, we start to see interest rates kind of come down, inflation start to settle, and so we'll actually benefit for 2 or 3 years under that half-penny sales tax with all that new revenue coming in, where we might be able to get ahead of some of our projects rather than seemingly just falling behind or staying stagnant. But I think overall the picture is positive, but it's going to take a lot of effort. We have to be very intentional in where we invest our dollars. That's why Mr. Pitts exists. I have to ask him every time I want $10, I have to ask him for it.
It really is a testament to good citizenry, though, when your residents will self-tax for the school,
Correct.
to better schools. So we do have some questions, a couple of them actually, regarding rezoning. One with more specificity about a teacher who's got kindergarten units that are over capacity at Bellicita or approaching capacity at Bellicita, but in generally, there's a lot of conversation here online about rezoning.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, Bellicita finds itself in the midst of that growth pattern, right, in the northeast quadrant of our school district, where Ridge, we just, our growth is just exponential. So we're going to have to, rezoning is one solution, new construction's another. But for elementaries in particular, we're going to have to be very, very, very intentional in how we do rezoning. High schools, again, will be our first bite at the apple. That will come before the board the next 2 months. I believe the next month, actually. The attendance boundary committee meets this week to finalize their proposals, and then they'll bring multiples forward. And then again, this would be for 24-25 implementation. And we started with that, and then they'll immediately go into middle school rezoning, and then they'll wrap up with elementary. Assurances I'd like to provide parents is, unlike some of the rezoning, like for example in Hillsborough, and nothing, I mean, they've had some really interesting needs, and he's doing the absolute right thing by rezoning this school district. But ours would not be a forced choice. So even though you'd be rezoned, your child, if you're currently attending a school, if your school was going to change, you'd be allowed to maintain your child at your current school. Here's the caveat. It may or may not include transportation. And I think that's the trade-off, right? With school choice and informed choice comes responsibility. And so we're going to have to be considerate of that, because otherwise all we're doing by rezoning is doubling the number of routes that we're having to run. So we have to be a little bit more considerate of how we're doing this, far more intentional. We have several buildings that are underutilized. So we have space, especially in the center part of our school district. And so we want to be good stewards. We want to make sure that we're taking care of your tax dollars. And I respectfully want to provide the best ROI we can. So there'll be plenty of information. We are not on an accelerated timeline. So I think everyone who keeps hearing about rezoning, I think because of what's been happening in neighboring counties, gets a little nervous, rightfully so. But I just want to reassure everyone, it's a thoughtful, well-planned out, well-timed process, and there'll be plenty of time for public input, inquiry, discussion. Our board has demonstrated repeatedly, if there's one place the board really is incredibly intentional on, it has been on rezoning. And if they feel that a community is being disrupted, no matter how much I argue it's going to benefit the schools involved, they have said, go back to the drawing board and come back with another plan. And so that's what we do. So we'll go to the board first, and then everything will go out to the community, and then we'll finalize some things and keep the communication going.
Thank you. I'll call for anyone from the audience. I don't see any hands raised, so we'll just continue with our online discussion then. I know that school safety and the safety of our students is top of mind for you. You've talked at length about what you have planned for the campus safety. However, there's another aspect. It's getting to and from school. There are a number of conversations online right now about what can we do to improve bike ped safety.
You could probably answer this
Right.
question better than I can.
Anything can be done to improve pedestrian safety since traffic is already heavy at many of our schools.
And this is, and I mean, please, I don't want anybody to leave and hear what I'm about to say and think less of me, because I don't mean to minimize it. But every time I talk to people about traffic safety, I use the analogy of shark attacks. There are more shark attacks every single year. Why? Because more people are going to the beach and getting in the water every year. We're having, sadly, far more instances or examples of students being struck or nearly struck because we have far more vehicles on the road and we have more students attending our schools. So there are several strategies that we've been looking at. Ms. Long knows this. This has been a project of Polk Vision and the school district and the county. There's been a real sincere, legitimate commitment for the last, I would say, 10 plus years of really looking at this, because Polk County, nationally, we rank ninth
Pretty
most
high up.
hazardous pedestrian county in the nation. I don't know if I phrased that correctly. But as you drive around and you see all these new developments, there are places where there's no sidewalks on both sides of the street. There are places where there's no street lights. There are, we have schools where we're putting in flashers and crossing guards and those types of things. And we're still trying to, and historically we've had to wait until after the project was finished for the county and the state to approve the project. Well, now we've taken a much more proactive position where I've approached the county and said, listen, let us go ahead and pay for it, and then you reimburse us, so that we can put all the safety features in place now before the school opens, rather than opening a school and me being put in a position and the county being put in a position where people are asking, well, why didn't you put a sidewalk in, and where's the crosswalk, and where's the flasher? I think we do have to be a little bit more strategic in how we approach these things. We're doing more with pedestrian safety with our students. We found out that our students were actually not getting the lessons on pedestrian safety until the second semester. We didn't start teaching it till January and February. Well, kids are in school in August and September. So now we're teaching it both. We're teaching it at the end of the school year, reinforcing it, and we're teaching it at the beginning of the school year. Sadly, for some of our students, we've seen examples where we've got to get them to take some ownership and be more attentive. You can't walk with your earbuds in and a hoodie on and looking down at the ground or at your phone, walking out into the middle of the street. We've had some very near misses. We have sadly had one tragedy this year of a young man, and we've had issues with school buses. We've had issues with vehicular traffic. It's a sad reality. I don't think there's a month that goes by that I don't get a service or a safety report where a school bus hasn't been involved in an accident. I can tell you, thankfully, in almost every one of those instances, it has been another vehicle striking one of our buses. And I think we have to get a message out there, and we have to get people to understand you've got to pay attention. You've got to be aware that we've got children out here. And I worry about potential changes to the school start times over the next 3 years that could arguably put younger students out earlier in the dark. So we're trying to be as aggressive as we can. So let me summarize again. We are adding cameras to our stop arms, to our buses. We are doing a much more aggressive campaign to educate parents and drivers and students about the hazards of pedestrian safety and how to do so more carefully. We've increased the approach that we have to teaching students in school about it. We have a large campaign that's getting ready to relaunch again in partnership with Polk Vision and the county. We're going to be more innovative and more strategic in when we build a school, making sure that as many safety features as possible can be installed. We've actually looked at, can we bus less than 2 miles so that we can pull more of those typical kids that might be walking off the road and put them on a bus that's not necessarily full. So we're looking at every single option going into next school year because we've got to do a better job helping protect some of our students. But it's a partnership, and we really need parents to reinforce those things. And as I get it, I have been in those long lines at George Jenkins. I've been in long lines at other schools. When I get stuck at a school, I'm doing a school visit, and next thing I know, I stayed too long, and now I'm stuck in the drop-off pickup line. I get it. I know how frustrating it can be. But please, 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 please do not encourage your child to run out into the street because it's convenient. That momentary lapse, and I've had it happen to me just down the street here from the office. I've had a middle school student dart out across the street, and I've had to slam on my brakes. Thankfully, I was driving less than the speed limit in the school zone. But that student, and I rolled down my window and said something to the parent. I said, you got to be more careful. That you're saving 30 seconds or even, let's say, 10 minutes in drop-off and pickup time is not going to equate to something poor happening to your child because it was a safety thing. And I tell you, there are things that keep you up at night as a superintendent, and student safety is the number one thing.
And this is preventable.
Yes.
Right? Everything we're talking about is preventable. If we would all so engineering can only go so far, right? Traffic calming areas can only go so far if you don't obey, right? So there's engineering, enforcement, and education. So you're working on engineering in cooperation with local municipalities in the county. Enforcement, I know that you've spoken to our local PD as well as the sheriff's office about a bigger presence at times to help with those issues. And then education and personal responsibility. Right? Personal responsibility on the part of the bicyclist and the pedestrian, right? Whether they're an adult or a child. And then we drivers have to understand that we could be driving reasonably what could turn into a weapon in the wrong circumstance. So it is top of mind for the school district and Polk Vision and our county and municipal leaders. We're having big conversations about the next school year in particular with a pretty large-scale launch of awareness campaign. I love the K through 8 model, and I've got a couple of questions online about that. Are you considering expanding that model?
Yes, I am. I am a firm believer, and let's be honest, it's not a foreign idea here, and that's what I love about it. We have high schools or middle schools that are 612s, and we have K8s. I'm a firm believer that the longer a student can be part of a campus, the stronger the relationships and the less likely it is for us to miss something. We figure out kids, and then we hand them off to somebody else who has to then re-figure out that child. And we don't realize, especially in middle school, you know, as we hand students off from elementary to middle school, that transition is incredibly difficult for everyone involved. Parents, students, staff, and if we don't have the background information on those students, and the CUME folder will only tell you so much, that we really lose out on the relationship part. So the more you can create a culture on a school campus, like that neighborhood feel, where we're all vested in each other and in our students to be successful, I believe in its continuity of instruction. I believe in all those things. So I love K8s, and I like the 612 models we have. I think both are strong. You cannot argue with Frostproof. You cannot argue with the Fort Meade model. I mean, the pride in those communities, Bellicita, other places where we've launched K8, McLaughlin, we just expanded to a 612. In any place where I feel that it's going to be in the best interest of the community, I will always advocate for those settings.
So one of our questions goes back to books in our libraries. And I think they'd like to be reminded. I think you're on record with the determinations that were made, but there's a question: how is the school district ensuring that classroom libraries only have those books that are appropriate for students?
Yeah, so there's a new statute that passed that basically requires us to include all classroom materials in our review and in our catalog of instructional materials so that parents know exactly what their children may have access to. And so right now, teachers are starting the process of going through their books. We have told teachers they don't have to have every book reviewed by the start of the school year, but the only books that can be available in their classroom are those that have been vetted. And so basically, they go through any book that previously exists in our school system and has not been challenged or has not had an issue with it, where it's been discussed, decisions been made to remove it or to replace it. So some of our for example, when we had recent book challenges, I made the decision, even though the committee said retain the book, I moved it to a different grade level. So from middle school to high school or elementary to middle, based off its appropriateness. And so the teachers are helping with that in that regard, but that's required. So we have an opt-in process, and or an opt-out process, excuse me, where parents can go through, see every single book, and they can basically pick any book that they don't want to have access to. The books that were challenged, the initial list of books that were challenged, and any book that's challenged formally at that school will actually be highlighted. So parents will have a notice saying this book's been challenged, so they may want to pay a little bit more attention to those books and opt out of them. What's interesting is we've had, as far as the challenged books, we've only had 7 families opt out of books. And so I think in total, there's less than 120 who have opted out of instructional materials or library materials. So we will keep adding to our catalog. Right now, parents have 2 options a year, 2 time periods a year. We did that intentionally, and I'll explain why. You can have a book review at the beginning of the year or at the semester break, right, when you come back in January. And the reason for that is I needed to control the time frame in which we bought new materials. So historically, schools could buy materials whenever they wanted to. Well, that makes it very difficult for us to vet those materials and then make sure they get into the catalog. So we said, no, we're only going to do it twice a year. Now, moving forward, a year from now, not this school year, a year from now, we will be transitioning to a better platform that will allow us to basically, parents can have the entirety of the year. So any day they can go in there and choose to opt out of a book. Recently, I had somebody challenge that basically said that only doing the opt-out is what's created problems for our teachers. It's created animosity, frustrations amongst our teachers, and it's the opt-out process. And with all due respect, people who believe that just need to take a step back and realize, even with an opt-in, where the parents have to say, yes, I want my child to have access to these books, they have to know what books we have. And the only way to know what books you have in classrooms is to have teachers audit their books and develop an inventory. And so that's the process we're in. The problem for many of our teachers, and we've shared this, and I share their frustrations as a former science teacher. I mean, you've seen my office, the number of books I have. We collect materials over years. As classroom teachers at elementary schools, they get books donated all the time. If they do a book fair, sometimes they benefit with a donation back from Scholastic. So if a teacher's been teaching 10 or 15 years, it's not unlikely for them to have 1,000 or more titles in their book collection. And so for them to look at that saying, well, now I have to review all these, it seems overwhelming. We have several options. They can invite parent volunteers in to assist them. We can bring high school volunteers in to assist. They're not approving, I want to clarify, they're not approving a book. They're looking in our system and saying, has this book been previously approved? If yes, it's okay. If it's not in the system, then it has to be submitted for review and it cannot be shown to students. So we take a lot of steps to protect our students and again, to empower our parents to be able to make that informed decision for their child. I respect that and I value that.
Thank you. That's a very thorough explanation, and I don't think your average citizen understands that teacher obligation, right? I think we're all thinking of the libraries, the formal libraries, which can be readily cataloged, as opposed to the resources the teacher, on their own behalf over a number of years, buying their own materials for the classroom, would have to undertake. But thank you for that thorough explanation. I think some folks are concerned about the teacher shortage. And what do you foresee coming into the next school year?
So the state of Florida actually has taken several steps through this session to help. The hope would be, and obviously we'll have to wait to see what kind of impact it has, but a teacher drop used to be 5 years, and now it's 8 years, based off this legislative session. And I think it initially moved to 7, and now it's moved to 8. So they can be in a drop program and aren't forced to leave until their 8th year. They've done more with teacher certification, not necessarily limiting or creating an environment where teachers are certified with less than stellar credentials or backgrounds, but there's more flexibility, especially for the trades and career tech ed staff, where they can apply industry time in lieu of some of the classroom time requirements. And so I think that type of flexibility, we have a veterans program now. We've been very innovative. As I shared earlier, we've gone outside our country. We've gone to international teachers who've been very successful. We have about 200 of those next year returning to Polk County. And that's a program we may have to continue to see expand, but they've been very, very effective in our sciences and our math classrooms and others. And other strategies that we're using, and it would not surprise me in the near future if we don't see some changes at the state level where we're allowed to flex teachers. And I'm not saying we're doing that, but we may see in the future where, let's say it's really difficult to find an AP calculus teacher. Well, you may have 2 classes being taught by the same teacher, but that teacher may be physically present in the classroom every other day and virtual to the other class. And again, it's not perfect, but I'm trying to think ahead. What are all the other solutions that are out there? I think the partnership one is an interesting opportunity for us, where we can partially pay people to come in and teach, even if it's part-time. We have been very reluctant to employ part-timers. And I think now is the time for us to revisit that and allow part-time instruction on our campus for people who don't want to work a full day, and that's fine. So long as they meet the criteria and they have the certifications and endorsements, I think we're going to have to be a little bit more innovative in our approaches. I think you're going to continue to see an expansion of virtual instruction, because that works for some, doesn't work for all, but it works for some. And I think you'll see a plethora of new opportunities coming. We're exploring currently a program that we became aware of out of Tennessee, where they actually pay high schoolers on an internship basis to support classrooms with a teacher, and then as they go to college, they pay for their tuition and bring them back. So it's been very successful for Tennessee. So we've been reaching out to them to get the details of that. So we're open to any number of ideas. I think, part of it too is we may have to reimagine what student teaching looks like with our colleges and universities, because that may become a paid opportunity versus a volunteer opportunity. So I'm just trying, and again, I'm a thinker, right? So I'm just trying to figure out how many flexible opportunities. Now, I can throw out all these great ideas, and of course they're great because they're my ideas, and none of them may come to fruition, right? But it's important that we discuss them and we explore them so we know what will work, we know the pros and cons, we know what the frustrations are. So some of the things I've thrown out, listen, as I reflect on them, I'm like, I wouldn't want to do that, but it may work. And so we've got to get a sense of where everybody else is in this narrative, but it is going to be a growing problem in the state of Florida. I think they anticipate 9,000 vacancies next year. Now, I will end on a positive, and I shared it earlier in the presentation, that even with 7,200 more kids in Polk County, we have fewer vacancies than we had last year at the same time with fewer kids, almost less than half. So I think we've seen some steady improvements. So long as we can maintain a strong workforce with retention, strong retention rates of 82% or higher, I think we have a strong recruitment team that's out there. We sent a team to Puerto Rico. We're looking for international teachers. There is no rock unturned right now.
Right.
And we realize the value of this. And there may be some other things we have to do to fill vacancies. So we love having instructional coaches. We love having all those positions. But it would not surprise me if push came to shove, those people may have to return to the classroom. And we wouldn't be the only ones discussing that. School districts in Florida did that this year to help cover some of their instructional vacancies. So we'll see how it unfolds over the summer. I think we're well positioned. Our numbers right now look really positive. And with the new staffing allocation model, it's really proven its worth and its value. And so I'm excited going into the next year. But again, want to continue to offer the reassurance to our families. We will do everything we possibly can to make sure there's a quality person in front of their child each day.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience with a question? I have at least one in the queue here from our online audience. This actually speaks to the heart of perhaps why you're looking for Spanish-speaking teachers. There's a burgeoning population of Spanish speakers moving into Polk County, along with many other languages. I guess the question really is, how do you, with potentially 6,000 to 7,000 more students next year, what are your plans to keep pace with the needs to provide translation or adequate, understandable teaching to those kids and their families?
So translation has been, let me clarify a bit there too, because the data is not really indicative of a large EL population. So yes, we are 42% Hispanic, but less than 10% EL, English language learners, which means those students aren't necessarily newcomers. They're second, third generation students. Now I also want to clarify that doesn't mean that they don't need language support, because there's often a misnomer there as well. So they do. So our emphasis right now is to keep hiring and recruiting and growing our talent pool. And we have to, like I said, we've gone to Puerto Rico, we've gone international. So we've got some amazing teachers who came here from the Philippines, from Jamaica, from Africa. I mean, they're just amazing. And their language acquisition and their skills are really high, but their instructional skills, their content knowledge is quite exceptional. Now, there's a culture shock arriving here and the differences, because sometimes, education is perceived differently where they come from. It's held to a higher standard at times, and so they're so used to some of the classroom management issues. So we do a lot of training and support for them to make sure they can be successful. But I think for our Hispanic students in particular, Ms. Trejo has done a very good job. She's our new person over that department, and she really has hit the ground running. She did a listening tour. She visited all her schools, including our charter schools. So I give her a lot of credit, because she realizes we're not just here serving public school students, we're here serving all school students. And she just presented a program on last Tuesday to our school board that will actually provide some elective supports for our students, and it's more engaging for them, and it helps them maintain that sense of culture as well, because that's also something that becomes important, is we don't want students to lose their sense of identity in a school system either. So making sure they have a voice, making sure they have representation is important for all of our students. So
We have a question from the audience.
Hello there.
yes, sir.
I was just wondering, would you be able to elaborate on how you plan on incorporating the whole child approach into teaching?
It's not into teaching. It's in how we as a school system structure ourselves to make sure that we have equity of access. So one of the reasons, let me give you an academy program. If we find that an academy is not recruiting anything but white students, we need to ask the question why. Why are students not applying for that? Are there barriers to them applying? CFAA at Lakeland, we recognized that the barrier was not a cultural one, it wasn't a racial one, it was simply the fact that it was so far away from the east side of the district that we had to replicate the program over there to create better access for students. So it's just that, it's making sure, again, we have well-rounded programs and that our programs are reflective of student interests and not just adult interests, that we have pre-college programs, we have remediation programs, we have good transition programs for our special needs students upon graduation. That it's all of that, it's all encompassing. So it's not an instructional approach, it really is. Now we do have in MTSS, and we do have other things, so we have social norms and behaviors that we expect of all of our students. You don't hit other people, right? Use your words, keep your hands to yourself. Those are common things that we reinforce. And those are, I think, values that we all share. But no, there's no curriculum that we teach that's specific to that. It really just is, as a school district, how are we approaching making sure all of our kids have equal access to opportunities, whether it's academic or enrichment or other things. You're welcome.
So I believe we've come to the end of our online questions that are pending.
Okay.
Are there any more comments from the live audience? Any questions? If not, do you have any closing remarks that you want to leave with everyone?
I just want to remind everybody, we'll follow up on the one question about food service and nutrition. We'll put a narrative as an addendum to the video link so everybody sees that we responded to that to identify why there may be disparities across the district or should not be. But I'll be curious to hear that answer myself. But I would say thank you. I think the community as a whole, in all of these meetings, and I do apologize, we had to cancel one because of a health issue, and I do sincerely apologize. But the reality of it is we had double the number this time than we did our first year. We'll continue to see the number grow. We like going out into the community. This is the only one we've held here. We've gone out into the communities where people live. Every one of them has had a different concern that they wanted to voice and share. So that's been really important for me to hear. What are the unique needs of each one of our communities that we serve? And that's can be difficult in large districts. You want to maintain that connection so that we don't just, again, make assumptions based off certain information that we have. And we can't believe that like Davenport, one of the biggest concerns they had was student safety. You recall those meetings. Other meetings, when we were in Haines City, the concern was about the new high school. When we were in Winter Haven, we talked a little bit about everything, quite frankly. And so every community has brought a different perspective, a different need, a different interest, and that's why we do this. You know, I will never assume to know everything, and I'm more than happy, and it doesn't bother me to tell somebody I don't know an answer. I think it's important for me to recognize that. I've got an amazing team of people who help me and keep me out of trouble. But you know, we want to be as responsive as we can, and I want to maintain a point of contact with all of you as stakeholders. And this is the best way I see that we can do it. And you know, Polk County is an amazing place, and we have no place to go but up. And I'm really proud to be here. I know my son is flourishing in our system, and you know what I hope everybody takes away is, as a dad, forget as an educator first and foremost, but as a dad, I want certain things for my child. I want him to have a better life than I have, or the experience that I had growing up. I want him to be successful. I want him to go on and do his own thing. And as a result of that, the same desires and interests I have for my child are the same ones I have for every kid in our school system. Having a child, I'll be honest with you, makes you a better leader, a better educator when you're in a school district, because you have a perspective that you may not otherwise have. And I'm not saying that those without children can't be. I'm just simply saying that when I had my son, I became a different leader than I was before, because all of a sudden you realize not every child has the opportunities that my child has, and the support system he has. And so it's important for me to realize that I need to make sure that that exists for everybody, and that we have good equity and opportunities for our kids across the board. And again, it's a great school district. We've got great community support. The passion and the pride that this community takes in its school system resonates no matter where you go. It's true in the business world. It's true in law enforcement, with our municipalities. And let's be honest, the continued success of Polk County hinges on what happens here every day. We turn out the workforce. We turn out the future leaders, the future visionaries. We do all of that in partnership with our parents, and we got to make sure that we're doing a good job with that. And so, I take that responsibility very seriously. And the one thing I was asked is, at the end of the day, Mr. Heid, what's the one thing, if you could paint a picture of what success looks like in Polk County, what would it be? And I use graduation. It's a combination. So in your mind, think about a high school graduation as kids walk across the stage and they shake all of our hands. They're all clammy and sweaty hands because all the kids are nervous. As they come across the stage and they get their diplomas and they exit, now imagine the stock market floor when it's just going absolutely crazy, right? Trading's at a high peak. It's volatile. It's exciting. It's all this energy. But what I want that to be people clamoring for our kids. So graduation's great, but that piece of paper that they get is not a certificate of completion. That piece of paper they get is indicative that they can truly enter to the world in the workplace and be successful and be competitive. And I want people to respect that and see that value that I anticipate for our school, for our students, and to have that sense of pride that they're all fighting for our kids, that the military services are demanding, we want your kids, that all the local businesses are demanding our kids, all the college universities are demanding our kids, because the quality product that we provide out of Polk County is that level. And that's what success looks like to me. And we will attain that. And we're working hard on it. And we've got, I tell you what, in an organization this large, 15,000 employees, I am constantly amazed at the level of dedication that our staff have. And I'll leave you with one last example of that. Last week, unfortunately, we had a bus that the brake caliper locked up while the bus driver was driving it. This happened in the Lake Wales area, Winter Haven area, and the caliper got so hot that it actually set the brakes on fire, and the front wheel well eventually caught on fire. Bus driver, very calmly, got all of the students out the back door, got them safely set aside, called emergency, and started to put out the fire. And multiple people contacted us and really commended our employees on the job that they did, because clearly they were well trained, everybody was calm, the kids were well behaved, and the bus driver acted in good conscience and good faith. So that's what we want. We want to recognize our employees who do those amazing things every day. And I don't want them to be firefighters, don't get me wrong, but their training came in, and that's what we rely on. We rely on people who have a heart for kids. And, show me somebody who walks through the door who wants to be a teacher. If you love kids, I can make you a great teacher. If you don't like kids, this is the wrong job, and it's the best job in the world. It is, hands down, it's the best job on the planet. There is no more rewarding profession than public education, or education in general, I should say. So I'll leave you with all that.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for the series of conversations we've had the privilege of assisting you with around the county. And thank you for joining us tonight, both in person and virtually. And with that, I think we'll sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.